Hey, thanks for tuning in. In this video, we're going to talk about dining out while trying to keep kosher, or dining out while seeking to observe the biblical commands. There are two special guests that will be joining us for this video. They are going to be providing their expertise and their knowledge from the other side of things, from the actual food service side of the issue. Both of these people are friends of mine that have awareness of the Torah and have experience in seeking to follow the biblical commands. They are aware of kosher issues, and they also have increased awareness of ingredients and food production. And both of them have experience at multiple restaurants, and they are going to be sharing with us their experience and their insight into the issue of dining out while trying to keep kosher. And after we discuss these issues with them, we will also be talking about some points that are raised in the course of the interview. So let's welcome our very kind and generous guests. You worked at a restaurant for a while. Tell us a little bit about what the kitchen was like.
The kitchen was chaotic, consistently. Pretty much anytime we had customers in there, things were crazy. People running around, ingredients flying.
I've worked at 3 different restaurants, 2 sandwich places, and currently at a pizza place. Well, at all 3 places, it's been all the toppings are on a table in containers that are basically touching each other. They're right next to each other. So if you grab something out of one of them, a lot of times stuff will fall out of it and the one next to it.
I think a lot of people, for some reason, they come into the restaurant and they look at a menu, I guess, and they see, okay, salad, steak, potatoes, and they think they're going to get this kind of sterile meal, that they're going to know exactly what they're getting, and that no hidden ingredients or anything unexpected. Tell us about that.
I think the one of the biggest concerns in a restaurant situation is you're not going to be getting a sterile meal.
At my current work, crumbled sausage is right next to mushrooms, so a lot of it winds up spilling into the mushrooms.
Ingredients will be flying around.
Yeah, a lot of toppings spill into the toppings next to them.
When somebody in the kitchen accidentally puts the pork chop on the steak plate, they're not going to get you a whole new plate. They're just going to move the pork chop where it needs to go and the steak where it needs to go.
If toppings are thrown on the pizza and spill onto the table that we make it on, sometimes we'll pick them back up and put them back on. All the spilled toppings get mixed together, and so there's also contamination there, and everything has touched the table.
Not everybody in the kitchen is going to be trying their best to do that because they don't even know what your standards are, what your expectations are of that meal.
Obviously, we make an effort to do that, but like I said, toppings touch other toppings. Sometimes a little bit of sausage will get thrown on a pizza and we'll miss it and it'll make it out to you. That's fairly common.
Tell us a little bit about communication between the wait staff and the cooks, and also communication, I guess, with the customers, asking questions and making requests.
I can tell you communication between the wait staff and the cooks at the restaurant I worked at, it was not very clear. Most of the cooks at the restaurant I worked at only spoke Spanish. Frequently, whenever a customer asked me a question, I would have to go to the cooks and try to get an answer out of them, which was difficult when we weren't speaking the same language.
We talked earlier about a story, an incident where people were requesting no animal products. Tell us about that.
I had a couple who was Hindu, and they asked me if there was any animal byproduct in the rice. You'd think rice would be a fairly innocuous dish to order, but I went back to the kitchen, asked them, if there was any animal in the rice. That was about the best I could do, and they told me no animal. It took me a little while to get there, but we eventually determined to no animal. So I went back to the customers and, oh, don't worry, there's no animal in the rice. Probably about a week later, when I was doing some more intense training with my manager about the dishes we served, and they told me, oh yeah, we use chicken base in all of our rice. So it was long after the customer left that I found out that I had given them the wrong answer.
Yeah, so they didn't get what they were expecting.
Oh, no. I tried. I was certainly eager to give them the right answer, but didn't follow through that time. It's frequently the case that I think that servers want to do well by their customers and they want to give them the right answer. But with things so crazy and with just a lack of information being available, it's really hard to consistently get good answers to the customers when you're trying to be quick.
So there are people out there that they may be just coming to learn about the Torah and learning about clean and unclean and eating cleanly and not eating unkosher things. How likely do you think it is for a restaurant visit for them to be safe?
Considering the chaos that goes on in any kitchen where they serve multiple customers, I just don't think it's really... I don't think there's a good enough guarantee that you aren't going to get some kind of cross-contamination. You don't know what kind of natural flavors go into the food that you're eating, or enzymes, or just really any of those little mystery ingredients that you'll find on a food package. You don't know where those came from, and it's not easy to find out.
And like you were saying, the people that work at the restaurant, they don't know either.
No, they don't. It's definitely risky.
Any restaurant that serves pork, for example, it's going to end up everywhere, isn't it?
Pretty much. It's going to touch everything and cross-contaminate with everything.
Nothing sterile. Not at a restaurant that serves anything that's unclean. I mean, there can be hidden ingredients in anything. You don't know what that steak was seasoned with. You don't know that your mashed potatoes that you got with your steak, you don't know they don't have any pork fat, for instance, hidden in those mashed potatoes. It's just too hard to know.
So as you see, and as you heard, dining out and trying to keep the biblical commands or trying to keep kosher, doing those things at the same time is a very difficult situation. It's a very unrealistic proposition in my view. At the very minimum, it is very risky. We talked about 3 primary issues when dining out and trying to keep kosher. Number 1 is cross-contamination. For example, we talked about how work surfaces are shared. Usually for most foods, they're using the same work surface. You're going to get things mixed together. And also, of course, ingredients get mixed together, as we talked about. And also, it was said that if a restaurant serves pork, pork's going to get into everything. And so cross-contamination is a definite issue, a definite risk, and there's no real way to mitigate that if the restaurant serves anything unclean. And number 2 is the issue of ingredients. I recommend that if you have not yet watched the video on determining kosher by ingredients, that you check that out. In the description below. There will be a link for you to click. It's very hard to try to determine something to be kosher based upon an ingredients list. And part of that is because the ingredients list doesn't tell us the whole story. And another part of it is that we don't necessarily know as much as we want to think that we know about all of these individual ingredients and about how they came about. And so ingredients is an issue in packaged and processed food in general, but it's also an issue in regard to restaurants because, for one thing, they oftentimes use packaged or processed foods at least as one of the ingredients in a meal, at least as a starter for something that they prepare and serve at the restaurant. And so we don't know about that. And also, just as an example, seemingly innocuous, seemingly innocent things like baked potatoes or French fries, both of those I have witnessed on occasions to contain pig lard and beef tallow, respectively. The pig lard was at Texas Roadhouse. I heard about this, and this was confirmed by management, supposedly. And also, the beef tallow and French fries was for McDonald's. This was what they were doing when I checked about it several years ago. I assume they're still doing it today. They would not respond to my inquiry, and they still do use beef ingredients in their fries, according to their website. So I assume they've just continued doing the same thing and putting beef tallow into it, which is not allowed. So 2 seemingly innocent things like potatoes and fries, we don't necessarily know what went into that. And so we might go into a restaurant and think we're getting something like salad, steak, and potatoes, and yet we may also be getting added pork and we don't even realize it and we won't even know. Or even worse, we're getting beef tallow, which is definitely a problem, definitely something we're not supposed to be doing either. And the third issue that we talked about was the issue of communication. Communication is a very slippery thing. The people at the restaurant, they don't know what our expectations are. They don't know what our criteria are. And we may think that we've communicated it well to them, but in reality, we probably left something out. They probably made some assumption, and they don't really know what's going on. And if they are talking to other people, for example, say we share our concerns or expectations with our server, they may talk to cook staff or management about an issue. They're likely to miscommunicate our expectations when they're talking to someone else because they probably don't understand it to begin with. And furthermore, they don't have the same concern about these issues that we do. And so to expect them to be as diligent about this or to be as careful about this as we want to be is a pretty unrealistic proposition. It's pretty unreasonable to expect that from them. And also, we talked about how sometimes different people in the restaurant, different staff members, for example, the kitchen staff and the wait staff, they may just literally speak different languages. They may not even be able to reasonably communicate with one another. And so obviously there's a communication issue there as well. And sometimes even when people are operating completely in good faith and they're trying to understand what you want, they may forget to mention things. And that was an experience that I had heard about someone else going through, that someone had gone to a restaurant and asked them, is the pork and the beef just completely separate? If we order the steak, is it going to have any, contamination from the pork? And the manager told them that no, absolutely not. We keep them completely separate. They're prepared separately. When you order that steak dinner, you're not going to get any pork. And yet, as I mentioned, the baked potato was fried in pig lard. Believe it or not, the baked potato had pig lard in it. And the manager either forgot or otherwise neglected to mention that issue, even though it was made clear to him that these people were trying to avoid pork. And so even if people are operating in good faith, even if people do have the knowledge, sometimes people forget. Sometimes people aren't sure of what you want to know. And so there's the slippage in communication. So for all three of those reasons, cross-contamination, ingredients, and also communication, it is a very risky proposition to try to dine out. And I used to recommend certain chains that did not serve any obviously problematic things, or maybe they only served one obviously problematic thing. I used to recommend certain chains and say that it was okay to eat at these, but I would no longer recommend any chain that I'm aware of. And in general, I would recommend staying away from restaurants even that claim to be kosher or even that claim to be vegan. The reason for this is, as I talk about in my kosher symbols video, which you can check in the description below, as I talk about there, a lot of this is just a marketing ploy. The business does not necessarily have the same criteria that we would use in determining something to be kosher. And anyone can just slap a plain script K on a package or claim that they have a kosher restaurant, but who knows according to whose criteria that is even being said. Same way with vegan. Anyone can say that they have a vegan or vegetarian restaurant. Is that actually true? Is that actually truly vegetarian or vegan? Well, who knows? And so if a restaurant is actually approved by a certification agency, which from my understanding some are, then that would be a different issue. Then presumably that would be okay. But those are very rare, and those are distinct from just people that claim that their restaurant is a certain way. We're talking about having to check with the agency to see about that. And so in general, I would not recommend dining out at all. I haven't dined out in years. And if you need another reason to do it, aside from the risks of violating the commands, consider also the economy of it. It's also cheaper to eat at home. And so for all of those reasons, I would recommend that we avoid dining out, that we don't dine out, and that you pack a lunch with you if you're going somewhere, or otherwise figure out some other way to have food with you that you know is going to be okay. I strongly advise that we avoid trying to figure out whether we can dine out somewhere, because in general, it's going to be totally unrealistic and it's going to be very risky. Thanks for watching. Feel free to like this video and share it if you think it could be useful to others and if you think it could generate discussion. And feel free to subscribe if you have not already, so we can stay in touch and so we can talk about more Torah issues. Be sure that if you haven't already to check out the videos below. I talk about more related issues such as trying to figure out if something is kosher based on the ingredients, and also issues of kosher symbols. So make sure you check that out in the description below if you have not already. Thanks for watching. Remember the commands. Peace.
It's definitely risky.
Any restaurant that serves pork, for example, it's going to end up everywhere, isn't it?
Pretty much.